Welcome to Bookreporter Talks To, where I'm pleased to once again be hosting our guests from Goodreads. Suzanne Skyvara, who is the Vice President of Marketing and Editorial, and Danny Feekes, who is their Managing Editor. Now, the last time these two joined us, we had such a great response from readers that we begged them to come back. We said, please, please, please come. And they were talking about summer books last time. They were with us in June. So it's September, and we said, we need you for fall reads. So welcome to both of you.
There was no begging involved, let me tell you. Danny and I saw that invite come in and immediately went, yes, we want to come back because we loved the conversation with you.
Oh, I am so glad. I am so glad. Well, we got such a great response. And what we're looking for this time is that you're going to be sharing some hidden gems. Like, you know what we're talking about on Bookreporter. You're both Bookreporter readers, but you're sharing some books that we may not be talking to our readers about or amplifying some of the ones that we already have. And for our readers, we're going to be sharing books from the following genres. So you want to stay listening right to the end. We're going to have 8 genres: fiction, historical fiction, mystery and thrillers, fantasy, horror, women's fiction, romance, and memoir. So like I said, you want to stay on to the end. And for any of you who are doing the Goodreads challenge and are trying to operate a little bit reading different genres or whatever, okay, you got just 3 months left to be reading the books for the rest of the year. So if you have not already picked something in the genres you swore you were going to do, you know, pre-pandemic, those thoughts that you made back in January, well, this is the moment to sit there and say, I was going to read a new genre, or, I was going to explore such and such an author. You've only got a couple of months left. So we've got lots to cover. Welcome to both of you, and let's roll on. Danny, I think you have our first selection.
Yes, thank you for that amazing introduction. We are so excited to be here. And you're exactly right. We're going to be talking about a lot of different genres and a few books that you may know about, but mostly under the radar picks. We really want to show what our early readers and reviewers are saying about books they love. So we can't wait to talk about a few books you might already know, but introduce you to some ones that you probably don't. And the first one we're going to be talking about today is a book called Transcendent Kingdom. This is by author Gyasi. And it is really loved amongst our community and one of the biggest books of fall. It has a 4.3 average rating, and our senior editor, Sybil Wallace, says it's her favorite book of the year. This book, you might recognize the author's name, Gyasi. She wrote Homegoing, which is also a very beloved book. That has a 4.4 average rating. This book has a 4.3 average rating. Safe to say that they're both very loved. This one is very different from that one, though. This one takes place in modern day Alabama and California, whereas Homegoing kind of followed generations of Ghanaian women throughout the centuries. But here we focus on a woman named Gifty, and she is a neuroscience student at Stanford, studying addiction and depression, ailments that have really impacted her family. And she wants to get to the bottom of how she can help her family members. What's really amazing, though, we have some pretty famous reviewers on Goodreads, and Roxane Gay is one of our favorites. And she had a really good review on Goodreads about this book. She calls it absolutely transcendent, a gorgeously woven narrative about a woman trying to survive the grief of a brother lost to addiction and a mother trapped in depression while pursuing her ambitions. Not a word or idea out of place, completely different from Homegoing. The range. She says, I'm quite angry. This is so good.
I love that. Quite angry. I love that line.
Quite angry. This is so good.
It sounds terrific. When I was reading the description of it, it's just, you know, where the writer is coming from. Like, where is she sitting and telling this story just sounded, because she's going to look at so many different tendrils of what's happening in the population right now. I just think it sounds wonderful.
I think she really captures the current moment and the opioid crisis specifically.
And what's going on? Danny, I think you've got our next one as well.
I think I'm up twice. Let's do it. So the next one I'm recommending is a book called Migrations by Charlotte McConaghy. So this one is for fans of Station 11 and Flight Behavior. It is a 4.3 average rating, so also really loved from our community. And it's being touted as cli-fi, which is a new genre about fiction that focuses on climate change and global warming. So very of the moment as well. You'll know it from the first lines of the book, which are, the animals are dying, soon we will be alone here. So it follows a woman named Franny Stone who's traveling to Greenland, and her goal is to follow the last remaining colony of seabirds from the Arctic to Antarctica. But she needs a ride, so she she hitches a lift with a captain of a herring boat, as one does. And he really wants to have her because he thinks that the bird trip will lead them to more fish. Great. But what we learn as she's on board is that she's an unreliable narrator. And she's been in jail, and she has an estranged husband who may or may not be alive. So what kind of starts as this cli-fi, climate fiction story about birds ends up being kind of a mystery thriller about kind of what's going on behind closed doors. This one's getting a lot of raves on our site.
And when I was at Winter Institute, which is the American Booksellers Conference back in January, I just want you to know that 4 independent booksellers put this book in my hand and said, you have to read this. So
Wow.
the buzz about this book was building way back then of this is one you're really going to want to read. So, love to hear that it actually is resonating that way as well with your readers too.
For sure. And then the last one I'm going to talk about for right now, and then I'll come back, don't worry, is a story called Memorial by Bryan Washington. So this is another big book of fall. It is Bryan Washington's second book following his critically acclaimed short story collection, Lot. It's the story of 2 young men in a biracial relationship, and they've been together for years, but their love is a little bit, their love story is becoming a little stale. But drama ensues when Mike, the Japanese American of the couple, he has to go to Japan to take care of his ailing father. At the same time, his mother is staying with his boyfriend in their apartment in Houston. And it can be cramped quarters. So the book follows the boys as they navigate their complex family relationships across both generations and cultures. This one's getting a lot of great reader buzz with a 4.1 average rating, but also a lot of critical acclaim.
Mm-hmm. And I also just pictured the mother-in-law, Mother and Liv, coming to stay with you. And it's like, wait a second, he's gone, you're here. What? Like, how did I sign up for this? This is not what I signed up to do. So I've read the first 50 pages of that, and it was really compelling because you're immediately into their story as you start out, and you're seeing there's these fractures in the relationship, but you didn't expect the mother-in-law to get layered into there. That's not Mother and Liv was coming, no. So then, Suzanne, you've got the new one from Jess Walter for us.
Yes, so we're switching tracks now and heading to historical fiction, and I've got 2 historical fictions for you. The first one, as you said, is the latest from Jess Walter, whose last book was Beautiful Ruin, which was a 2012 bestseller and really popular with a lot of people on Goodreads. His new book is called The Gold Millions, and it's set in 1909 in Spokane. And Spokane is actually where Jess Walter lives, so it's a passionate local story for him. And it's the story of 2 brothers. There's Rye, who's 16, and he's the younger one, but he actually ends up being a bit of a protector for his older brother, Gig, who's a bit more idealistic and also will be a bit more impetuous as well. They're both orphans and they're hobos. They travel from place to place looking for work, trying to keep body and soul together. And Goodreads reviewers talk about how this book is full of an incredible cast of characters. You've got Native Americans, recent immigrants, a shady police chief, you've got suffragettes, you've even got brothel madams. But Jess Walters loves to tell different characters, and so he does it really well here. But what's happening is in 1909 in Spokane it's a world where there's a movement, a fledgling movement to create a labor union. And they're trying to take hold because they're trying to protect the cold millions of workers. That's where the title comes from. And so many of us love historical fiction because we learn from it while reading it. And I think this one is a great one if you want to learn more about a little known part of American history while reading a gripping story about characters that you really care about. And this one's not coming out until October 27th. So if you're interested in The Cold Millions by Jess Walter, make sure you add that to your Goodreads Want to Read list.
Exactly. And I think that that's a part of the country that we haven't heard a lot about. Not a lot has been set there. And I think it'd be very interesting to be, one of my best friends lived there years ago, believe it or not. And then they have a fabulous lilac festival, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
and it's something in the spring that you just don't even think about. So looking forward to that one. So what else do you have for us?
So the second historical fiction I have is Miss Benson's Beetle. And it's by Rachel Joyce, who many of you will know from, she wrote The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. This one's not coming out for quite a long time. It's coming out at just around Thanksgiving time, November 24th. But the whole time I was reading this book, the main character, Marjorie, I kept seeing the actress Miranda Hart playing her. She's a British actress, and if you watch the PBS masterpiece series Call the Wit Midlife, she was the character who played Chummy a few seasons ago, and she's this tall, awkward, big, large, socially inept woman, and that's exactly what Marjorie Benson is. And poor Marjorie had a bit of a tough time earlier on in life, and here she is in the 1950s. She's a 47-year-old spinster, and after one humiliation too many, she just chucks it all in and says, right, I'm off from London. I'm going to go halfway around the world to New Caledonia in search of this mysterious, potentially mythical beetle, a golden beetle. But she needs an assistant to come with her. So she puts an ad for it, and she ends up with this character called Enid, who is pluckiness personified. She's brassy and a survivor, and talks 19 miles to the minute. I mean, this in complete contrast to Marjorie. I must admit, originally I was kind of like, I'm not quite sure about these two characters, and they certainly weren't sure of each other. But the more I read, the more I fell in love with them, and by the end I was really cheering them on. It was really, really fun. The dry British humor in this book is quite reminiscent of Major Pettigrew's Last Stand. I don't know if you read that one, but there's just that sly, it just sort of quietly says things, and then there's a zinger hidden in there, and you just burst out laughing at it. So PBS Masterpiece fans, this is one that you'll probably love. Just give it a little extra time at the beginning, but by the end, it's really worth it.
And the two very different characters, two very, very different people. And it's sort of like, how is this like the Odd Squad traveling together,
That is such a good summary. In fact, I think their cabin looked exactly like the Odd Squad would. So that one's called Miss Benson's Beetle by Rachel Joyce.
Yeah, and you just realize this person writes about pilgrimages, the pilgrimage of Harold Fry. It's like, where are you going to be adventuring, especially at a time when none of us are leaving our homes? It's like really nice to know that somebody's going on an adventure, because we're certainly not. So Suzanne, I think you've got the next one for us as well.
Yes, I'm going to switch us over now to some mystery, but still with a historical situation for it. So this one is called Murder on Gold Street by Sherry Thomas. It's actually the 5th book in a series, and it's a twist on Sherlock Holmes. So instead of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, it's Charlotte Holmes and Mrs. Watson, which I love. It's set in Victorian London, and Charlotte solves mysteries because she has the name Holmes and cannot resist. And in this one, her friend Inspector Treadles, which is a name that I just can't resist, I just think it's so British, has been found locked in a room with 2 dead men. So he's the obvious suspect. Rumors are flying. What makes it worse is the room was in a factory that's owned by his wife, and run by his wife, which is a bit of a scandal in Victoria, England anyway. And people are saying that this is her best one yet in the series. But if you like the sound of this and you haven't discovered the series yet, the first one is A Study in Scarlet Women. But otherwise, head for the 5th one in the series, Murder on Cold Street by Sherry Thomas.
And do you think you can read it as a standalone? You think it'll work? Because does she do a good job of describing backstory? Or do you feel like you're lost?
With this one, some people have read it as a standalone and felt that they could do it. But I think it's one of those ones where it's like, yes, it works, but you'll get so much more out of it if you do go back and read it, because there's definitely some things that have happened previously, as always, that impact on how characters are acting now.
It's like if you're cooking, if you use the right ingredients, if you don't substitute, it's a much better thing.
Exactly.
As I've learned. It's chemistry, and you can totally, especially with baking, totally mess it up. Totally mess it up. Danny, I think you've got our next one.
I do. I have, we're moving straight on to mystery thriller. So this one's pure mystery thriller. This one's When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. And this one's already out, so you can grab it. It came out first in paperback, which I personally love. I love a paperback. But this one is being described as Rear Window meets Get Out. It's from acclaimed romance author Alyssa Cole, who you may know from her Reluctant Royal series. But this is her first foray into the mystery thriller genre. I'm reading this one right now. It's great. It follows Brooklyn born and raised Sydney Green, who is watching her neighborhood slowly gentrify, and she wants to do something about it. So what she decides to do is create a historical walking tour. And she enlists a white neighbor named Theo, and they get together and do a lot of research about like kind of, you know, the neighborhood from the past, but also what's currently happening to it. And where the mystery comes in is they begin to unravel and discover that people who have started leaving the neighborhood as it's been gentrified may not have done it on their own accord. And the community, the revitalization of the community might be more deadly than they knew.
Ooh.
So it's you know, the get out effect that we've been hearing. We knew this was coming. It's really loved by our community and our members. And I think if you're looking for something of the moment but gripping, this will do.
Yeah. And with so much is going on is like, what is really happening in neighborhoods right now? What is really happening? How are things changing? What has the pandemic also done to different neighborhoods of people that have left? Like people are going back home now and they're like, wait a second, nobody's in the building anymore. What's ended up happening? So there's a lot of
I'll tell you
suspense
what's happening in my house. People are leaving and the rats are moving.
Oh no.
Luckily they haven't come inside the house, but.
But they're saying that because there are not restaurants, that they are trying to get into people's homes because they're in search of food. And I've also heard that in outdoor dining, which is really big, the rats are coming like to, you know, feast on the tables as well, because that's where food is. I mean, who knew? Like, well, we talked even back in June. Back in March, you weren't thinking any of this stuff, but now, like, really? This is what we need to worry about? Yeah.
Exactly. And Danny, you have a little puppy. I'm worried about Camper and the rats.
Hopefully Camper chases them away. Luckily they're in the basement where our trash is. It's you know, an apartment complex, but you know, we're trying to get it situated.
But wait a second, how is he doing? Because remember, the last time we talked, he was brand new. How is he acclimated to hanging out with you all day?
He's doing really good. We're still working on potty training. He's a little stubborn French bulldog, but we're getting there.
We need a little longer pandemic in order for this to work. We need a little bit longer time.
Exactly.
Can I just say, by the way, on Alyssa Cole, who's written this book, she's amazing. She just is so talented because she built her career as a romance writer, and not just, and then was playing around with different types of romance. She refuses to be pigeonholed, and now she's experimenting with this mystery and thriller. So all hats off to her.
And you know what a tough move that is to make, because so many times that's exactly what the readers are expecting you to do this. And if you're going to take a quantum leap by yourself as well. You're going to be sitting there saying, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to try. And who are you going to discover along the way that's going to be reading you too? So hats off to me. Speaking of which, we've got confessions on the 745.
So I've realized that I've got this complete British thing happening. Yes, this one's set in Britain too. Sorry, everyone, but I have some biases apparently. So this one is Confessions on the 745 by Lisa Unger. And if you're looking to spend some time with a psychological thriller full of twists and turns and characters who you just cannot trust, this one's for you. And when I was looking at the premise of this, I was thinking, isn't it funny how when you can be in weird situations that are slightly stressful, it can be really bonding between strangers, right? And so this starts with two women who are sitting on a train heading out of London, and it gets stuck in a tunnel, and they're just stuck and they've got nothing to do. And so one of them, Martha, starts confessing, amazingly enough, it's very un-British, but she starts confessing that she's sleeping with her boss. So then the other one, Selena, shares that she's just discovered that her husband is sleeping with the nanny. And so there's lots of oversharing. Well, then the train starts moving again. The women say goodbye. But the next morning, the nanny has disappeared. And what makes it worse is that Selena is now getting mysterious text messages from Martha. And she never gave Martha her phone number. The book is told from a variety of different perspectives, which, as we know well, not every author can pull off. But Goodreads reviewers are saying this is exceptionally well plotted, really well written, and very well paced as well. High marks all around. In fact, their key advice is block off some time when you start this one. First, just to kind of get into it all, but then because once you start, you're not going to be able to stop.
You know, I read this one. First of all, I love because you always sit on a plane and tell somebody the story of your life, and then you land and see them at baggage claim. And, you know, usually some guy who said, oh, my wife does this, this, this. And then you see her at baggage claim, or you've said, you know, my husband doesn't do the dishes, or whatever it is. And then you see each other and you're like, oh, hi, you know, like really, oh, good. So these two people are going to trip over each other. I've been reading Lisa Unger for years. And here's a very funny Lisa Unger story. She was in New Jersey one day, which is where I live. And she said, I said, well, why don't you swing by and have coffee? Like, you know, in the morning, she says, oh yeah, I'll come for coffee. Well, I don't know how to make coffee. Literally do not know how to make coffee. And people are like, oh my gosh, you don't drink caffeine? I was like, no caffeine. This is normal me. So it was really funny. So she's coming over and I said to my husband, just set everything up. So I just have to hit the button, like when she comes, and it'll look like, and it has become our joke for years of, gee, you want to come over for coffee? I'll get my husband to make it. I'll just hit the button. And she's like, I just can't believe you can't do that. But she's such a talented writer. But I feel like this book was like a leap forward for her as well, the setting and just the twists and turns that this one takes, that sometimes twists and turns get you lost, but this was not losing me. I felt like when you looked later on, you weren't like, oh, that was a quantum leap, like not a good leap. That was a perfect leap.
Yeah. And that so often happens like with mysteries, right? Every now and then you're like, oh, that didn't quite land, or you left an unanswered question. But it's noticeable how much the reviewers are saying, this is really well done. And really, so she's well pulling it off, which is great. Okay. And that one's coming out October 6th.
October 6th. Danny, you've got our next one, which is Leave the World Behind.
Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. So he's the author of two other books, one called Rich and Pretty, the other That Kind of Mother. Both really acclaimed literary fiction books, but we're actually expecting this one to be his breakout. It comes out October 6th, and the early buzz on this one is palpable. And it's really of the moment. It's about a family, the mother and father named Amanda and Clay, and they take their two teenage children to escape New York City. They need an escape. They need to leave the world behind. So they find this place on Airbnb in a remote corner of Long Island. And one night when they're there, they get a knock on the door from Ruth and GH. And these are the people who actually own the Airbnb property. And they come with very scary news that New York City has been kind of shut down, is in the middle of a blackout. And can they stay in their own home with Amanda and Clay? Would they be so generous? Well, they do. And with no internet or cell service at the remote Long Island Airbnb, questions arise whether they were telling the truth or not. And the book explores the complexities of parenthood, race, and class. Our senior editor, Sybil, also just read this one, and she says it's excellent.
And it's one of those books too, because I love it at the beginning. I was reading this weekend. They're going to the store and they're buying hot dogs, like they're describing what they're going to buy, and it costs $100. But the really funny thing is these people have put all their money into do this vacation, and they're not quite at the beach. They have to drive to the beach. There are all these things. But these people offer them $1,000 if they can stay with them. And the husband is just going in his mind, can I get my $1,000? Can I get my $1,000? Because if you're going to stay with me, I want my $1,000. And it's just these two and these children that are, all they want is the internet. All they want is screen time. And there's no screen time now. But what's really going on back in the city? Because the other people don't want to walk up 12 flights of stairs when they go home in the dark. So it's just...
I once saw this joke, which every parent of teenager I know burst out laughing with, which is that what would teenagers do if they ever got to the gates of heaven? You know, the first thing they'd ask St. Peter is, "What's the Wi-Fi password?" It's so true. They walk in anywhere new, and it's immediately like, "Give me my Wi-Fi password."
Yes. How do I connect? How do I connect? And they just sit down in the chair. Yeah, it's totally true. Especially if you're in a vacation home and they don't have everything labeled exactly. It's really,
but this one's so much anticipation around it, and it's really nice to see the reviews coming out and really recommending this one.
And as a stunning cover, as an absolutely stunning cover as well.
Yes.
I definitely took that as well. Suzanne, you've got our next one.
Yes. So you talked earlier about setting yourself the challenge of reading more broadly, reading differently. So this is a debut author that will really hit a number of interesting new needs for you. It's Winter Counts by David Hesker Wambley Wyden. Let me do some scene setting for you. Your daughter's boyfriend hitting her, or is your kid being abused by a rogue teacher? Who do you call? you call Virgil Wounded Horse. He's the unofficial vigilante of the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, and he's going to take care of things that the law won't. I love a book that sucks me in and I lose all track of time, but also gives me whole new insights and perspectives. And Winter Counts really does that. While following Virgil as he tries to figure out who's bringing heroin onto the reservation, you learn a whole lot more about the Lakota culture and the issues faced by the indigenous people. What's fantastic about this is that David Hesker Wambley Wyden is a registered member of the Sikangu Lakota Nation, and he's also got a JD degree and has had a legal career. So he brings all of that incredible knowledge and expertise to the novel and writes a really great crime story. It's gritty enough that I kind of think fans of Don Winslow will like this one. Okay. And I also definitely think people who enjoyed Craig Johnson's Longmire series, whether you read it or watched it on TV, I think this one's going to really appeal to you. I noticed that the Bookreporter review on Goodreads, they said what several other reviewers have noted, which is, I loved this book and I want more stories with Virgil in it, which is great to see. So crime fans, this debut novel is a slow burn, character-driven story that will then have you staying up late at night to finish the book. And by the way, I love the fact, Carol, that Bookreporter reviews on Goodreads. You have a couple of accounts because you did it by genre, right?
We do. We did it by genre, and we did that specifically because we felt like we didn't want to have somebody who's looking for mystery thrillers find historical fiction. That's not what you're looking for from us. So we set up the specific accounts, and we've been populating them with reviews every week. I know we're adding every single week, and it's really been nice to see how many of our readers are saying, oh, we saw the review out on Goodreads, and besides seeing it, you know, on our pages as well, and then they can share it with friends too. So we like that. So
yeah,
wonderful opportunity.
The reviews that you and the team do are fantastic. I mean, really thoughtful, really great reviews that help you decide if you'll like the book or not. So I love following Bookreporter on Goodreads. It's really just great reviews.
Thank you. And we're so lucky because we actually have reviewers from across the country. We did an event with them at the end of August. And what we did was we realized that they were from all over the country. It's not like we're just bi-coastal, and we like that. And our readers that attended the event, I think they were from 36 different states. And we like that as well, because we don't want to be like, you know, we started with, we run America Online, and we're America Online across the board still of where our readers are from. And that's, I think this makes us a good pairing with Goodreads, because once again, it's people from across the world at this point that are all chiming in and sharing what they think about books. Yeah. So we appreciate the experience as well. So what is next? Who is next?
No, I'm next, and I've got The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. So you may know him from his books, How to Stop Time, Notes on a Nervous Planet, or his most famous one's called The Humans. But right now, this is his most loved book on Goodreads with an average rating of 4.4. And it came out early in the UK, so there's a lot of reviews here, but you can get it starting today in bookstores. The story here I love describing as sliding doors with a library twist. So it imagines a woman named Nora Seed who goes to a library, and each of the books in that library contain a different reality. So in one book, she'll find her life just as it is today, but in another book, she'll find a life that, had she made one decision differently, how it would have played out. And really what this book is about is, would you go to that library? Would you open those other books? And if so, if you were able to see what your life would have been had you made XYZ different decision, would it have been a happier life? Or maybe not. I haven't read this one, but I'm very much looking forward to diving in because our readers are loving it.
And it's fantasy. It's fantasy as a genre, correct?
Correct.
And I just love that you put yourself in all different places of what would my life have been. Because you know how many times you sit there and say, if I went that way, what would have ended up happening? So really, but different places in the library, no less, you know, different books there.
Danny and I were giggling when we were talking about this book pick, because I suddenly went, oh, It'd be so cool to see if there were other versions of 2020 in that library.
Would it really be? I mean, every single time you turn around, 2020 is getting crazier than it was. And we're thinking, oh, this is start a new decade. You remember if the controversy is 2021 the start or is 2020? Let's go with 2021 being the start. I mean, let's just go there and just start over, because and my friends always write, just when you thought that nothing else could happen. And what I find is this is a year where everything is taking so long that I like having books to read, because everything else is arduous. Everything else is, from going food shopping right on up and down the line. But you sit down with the book and like, now I know what I have. This is pretty good. I'll take it.
Yeah,
absolutely
exactly.
take it.
Yeah.
Suzanne, I think you've got another fantasy title for us.
I do. I really love this one. It's The Once and Future Witches by Alex Harrow. She came out with a debut novel last year, which was the 10,000 Books of January, which a lot of people loved. And she's done brilliantly with her sophomore effort. There's always a lot of tension, isn't there, with the sophomore effort? Will it be as good? And it's really, really good. It's a story about sisterhood, justice, racism, and fighting for women's rights, which is perfect timing, right? Because 2020 is the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. And this book, this fantasy book, is set in 1893 in New Salem, and the suffragettes are rallying for the vote. It's a time when women are being made small by the power of men, and they are expected to stay that way. And so they've decided that they've got to get the power of the ballot box. They need to participate with the vote. It's a world where witches are nothing but stories, or are they?
Which one is it?
The story follows three sisters who've been separated for 7 years, but are brought back together. And I really don't want to give too much away from this, because it's a really great story to go into relatively blind, but I'll tell you two things. One is, I really loved how Alex Harrow we wove in nursery rhymes and folk tales from around the world and referred to them as almost a secret language or messages that women had been passing down to their daughters over the ages. I just thought it was such a clever way to think about those. And then the second thing I'll tell you is this is actually my favorite book so far this year. I really, really enjoyed it. And if you like fantasy, I think you'll really enjoy this one.
And I think the cover is terrific as well. Looking at the cover on it, I think it's just a stunning cover, and it's very eye-catching. Whereas a lot of covers these days are, this one definitely take me away. I want to read this book. So who do we have next? Let me see. Nanny, I think we're back to you.
I'm taking you to a very dark place, and this is for a very specific person and a very specific moment. It is called Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Basterica. And it's actually an Argentinian novel that was recently translated into English and came out in August. And I'm listening to this one, and I'm a horror fan. And I like to joke that I'm kind of dead inside because nothing impacts or affects me. But even me, I get a little squeamish on this one. So definitely for a very specific person. But imagines a kind of dystopian present where all of the animals have acquired a virus and can no longer be eaten. But guess what? The propaganda exists. The only real good place to get your protein is from meat. You can't just eat vegetables. So what do? They start eating humans. And it's called Special Meat, and it's farmed in the same way that we farm animal meat. And the story follows Marcus, who works at one of these factories, but he's actually gifted product. And he begins to treat this woman as an actual human being versus meat. And the story kind of follows their relationship. It is definitely not one for the faint-hearted, but if you're looking for a horror that's not your own, this could be an escape.
But the rats, like seriously.
The rat. Yeah.
Let's go back to like, oh my gosh, we have a theme going here, folks. You know,
let's not like put ideas into 2020's mind, you know.
I have to tell you, this book, I cannot even touch, but I think the premise.
Yes, the premise is interesting.
I think the premise works as horror because, scarily enough, you could imagine something like that. God help us at work happening. Yeah. It's terrifying, and that's why it works as a horror book. And I just can't. Danny and I laugh at how squeamish I am. When I was last on, I was telling you with the Southern Book Club guide to vampires, I was like, I could read that one but I had to flip some pages. But this one, I cannot go anywhere near because I'm terrified by the concept.
That's horrified by the concept of what can happen. But you have the Cookbook Club next. The Cookbook Club.
We deliberately paired
let's just
these.
like segue, folks. Let's just segue, you know?
Exactly. We paired these deliberately. We were cracking up going, okay, we need to rescue ourselves from this deep, dark pit of terror. And I have that rescue for you all. And it's even a food theme one as well. It's a women's fiction book and it's called The Cookbook Club by Beth Harbison. And how's this for a club that we all want to join? Here's the advert. Must love butter, all caps. The Cookbook Club is now open to members. Foodies come join us. No diets and no skipping dessert. Sign up now.
I'm so totally there. Sounds such fun.
Exactly. So this is a light and fun one. It's a story of three women at a crossroads in their lives. Actually, when I say light and fun, these women are actually going through a tough time, but there's, we'll get them through. And so there's Margot, who's reeling from a divorce, and she's also at the same time trying to renovate a farmhouse by herself. There's Aja, who's unexpectedly pregnant, and unfortunately the father is no longer in the picture. And there's Trisha, who left a law career to start up a restaurant. And I chose this one because, Carol, you share a lot about recipes in the weekly email, and I know it's a big topic and something that a lot of subscribers really enjoy. And so this one's fun because not only do you get mouth-watering descriptions of the meals in the book, but there's also recipes at the back as well. So if you're stressing out these days, and let's face it, who isn't, this is a charming, light read about food, friends, and reinvention. It's a great escape.
Oh, it sounds great. They're reinventing their lives at the same time. But I've got to look at this just for the recipes, because that's like one of my favorite things. We went out to dinner because, you could do outdoor dining. Like, everybody was really excited about outdoor dining. We're like, well, we could get takeout pizza, but other than that, we don't need to eat outdoors except at our house. So all of a sudden, indoor dining opens. My husband and I thought we should go indoor dine. Like, we'll go support the restaurant industry. I've been out to dinner since, December. It's now September. We're going to go out to this. And we walk in for our indoor dining and they go, would you like to sit outside? We just look and we go, sure, we'll go outside. It's fine. Indoor looks a little drab at this moment anyway. So we got outside and I said, wow, this is the first time I've been out in like 9 months out to dinner. I tipped like a lot because I felt like, these people are running back and forth to the kitchen. And then later that week, I went into New York and saw my staff for the first time, and we went out to lunch. And then my son and I went for indoor dining again. And I'm like, whoa, this is like 3 times in 1 week. Like, we're not cooking at home. What is this? So
splurge time.
It's definitely like lifestyle change. It's not just splurge, it's lifestyle change. We left the house. My husband took a picture. So, Danny, you've got the next one, which is Spoiler Alert, correct?
Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. I'm laughing because I've been so agoraphobic, and I've also been stepping out recently, and I've been, going hardcore, going to a lot of restaurants. But yes, so let's forget the horror, let's leave that behind, and let's step into Spoiler Alert, which is a very fun, lighthearted read for your romance audience. It's a romantic comedy set in the world of fan fiction and follows a plus-size woman named April, who is really into writing fan fiction and dressing up in cosplay. And a photo of her that she takes dressing up as a character from her favorite show called Gods of the Gates ends up going viral for all of the wrong reasons, and she gets a lot of fat shaming. But because of the virality, she actually has the star of that show come to her rescue and ask her on a date. And so this book follows them as they begin dating, fan and star. And what we begin to learn is that the star of the show actually writes fan fiction on his own. So they have much more in common than you think. It's Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. It comes out October 6th, and it has a 4.2 average rating right now. So it's definitely loved amongst the romance readers.
Oh, I love that. I love that. How's that?
Better than human meat.
Exactly. To the human meat, please. You've got to bring yourself back. And you've got the next one. It's also romance.
I do. It wouldn't be fall season without some Christmas romances coming out. And the one I have is actually All About Us by Tom Ellen. And oh God, apologize again. It's a British setting. Sorry.
Shocking.
Sorry about that. So do you ever want to go back in time and change your decisions? And if you did, what would happen is kind of the premise of this book. So the central character is Ben, and he's married to Daphne, and their marriage is in a rut. And meanwhile, his old flame Alice, the one that got away from college days, has suddenly popped back in his life, and she gets back in touch. And we find him going out on Christmas Eve, sort of debating what's going on in his life, and a stranger gives him a watch. And the next morning when he wakes up, he's taken back 15 years to the 5th of December, 2005. And it's the day he first met Daphne, his wife. It's the first day they met and the first day they kissed. And you can follow him on a story of self-discovery as he thinks about the decisions he's made, and also opens his eyes to the things he missed along the way, or the things he chose to miss along the way. It's kind of like a cross of A Christmas Carol, and maybe a dash of It's a Wonderful Life with a bit of Time Traveler's Wife thrown in as well. So people are really loving this one. It's coming out on October 13th.
You know, so many times people question decisions of everything that they've done in life and how would it have played if I did this, this, this. And then you realize all the things that wouldn't have happened if you did those things. And this wouldn't have happened and that wouldn't have happened. And I think a book like that is just so much fun to explore, to sit there and say, but wait, if you took that other path, what else? Because I have this line, with soup, you get egg roll. So like, you know, with soup, you're going to get that. But did you really want the egg roll? Is that what you were really interested in? I'm not quite sure. But those two are going to go together.
And I have to say, the book is making me ask myself the question, would I go back and change anything? What would happen if I did? It's kind of an interesting premise to ask yourselves. Would you want that chance to go back or not? Yeah.
And where would that have landed you?
Midnight Library to see what happens in each of these books.
Exactly. We need the advanced knowledge.
We need to know exactly what's going on. Okay, so where we've been talking about is how you would have changed your life, what would have happened. Well, what happens if you really explored that in a group? So Danny, tell us about the next book, because boy, this one really going to take you a lot of different places.
Yes, this is our first nonfiction book that we're recommending. And the full title, I'm going to read it, is Group: How One Therapist and a Circle of Strangers Saved My Life. And this one's really for fans of Lori Gottlieb's Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, who herself calls this book heartbreaking and hilarious, surprising and redemptive. It's from debut memoirist Christy Tate. And she is someone who had suicidal ideations, even though everything was kind of going right in her life. She was top of her law school. She had gotten her eating disorder under control. She really felt like her life was on the up and up, but still was really having a hard time. So enter Dr. Rosen, a therapist who claims he can transform her life, but not by just one-on-one sessions. He recommends group therapy for her. He says, you don't need a cure, you need a witness. And this book really shows her journey from broken to back again, with not only the help of the therapist, but all of the strangers she meets along the way. I think this is it's obviously a journey for her, but what's really interesting about this book is how hilarious people are calling it. So there's clearly some dark, but a lot of levity here too. Again, if you've read Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, you should read Group: How One Therapist and a Circle of Strangers Saved My Life. This one's out October 20th.
You know, I actually heard her present the book to the media somewhere along the way. And she was just so interesting because she says, now you're sitting in the room, people are you going to talk about me? Like, is this what's going to go on? Are you writing about me? Like, what's going to happen? Well, and really what the whole group experienced, because she said she felt that she never could have accomplished one-on-one with a therapist what she was able to do with this group of people, because the things that they were bringing up, the thoughts that they were taking to the table, it was a multi-dimensional kind of experience instead of just that one-on-one that so many people have been through already in therapy. And sometimes if you don't click completely with the therapist every single week, you're not making progress. But this was an opportunity for a lot of people to say, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Very, very, very interesting. And Suzanne, you've got our last book, which is also a memoir, but it's by somebody that we're not used to having written memoir before.
Exactly. This is a memoir by Jacqueline Winspear, who is the author of the wonderful Maisie Dobbs series, which is beloved by so many readers. I will say it has wide appeal. If you haven't read the Maisie Dobbs series and you like the sound of this, don't let it stop you. A lot of Goodreads reviewers are saying, I hadn't actually read the series, but now that I've read the book, I want to read the series, which is great. And it's a richly detailed look at life in England after the Second World War. And it's a love letter to her family. You learn about her grandfather, who was someone who was suffered from shell shock from the First World War. You've got her mother, who comes from this large, boisterous Irish family. And then you've got her father, who grew up in a household with the grandfather suffering from shell shock. You had to be very quiet around the house. And her father ends up being someone who's just very cool and calm under pressure, surprisingly. And he ends up being an explosives expert in the Second World War. He gets completely drafted into it. It wasn't something he really wanted to do. And it's just this great, great story of perseverance by a family. And they live by the father's mantra, which is when anything is going pear-shaped and just not working out, he just says, this time next year we'll be laughing, which quite frankly is a mantra that I think we all need to be adopting right now. Maisie Dobbs fans will love connecting the dots between Winspear's family and her memoir and then what happens in the series. But ultimately, as one Goodreads member said, any reader who's looking for something uplifting during this difficult year will find a balm in this one. So I think a lot of people will be like, yes, please, I want that. It's coming out in November. So make sure you add it to your want to read list on Goodreads. It's called This Time Next Year We'll Be Laughing. And I actually think it could be a good self-gift, but it could be a really fun one for Christmas time as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good gift giving thing, but it also looks at a time where so many different generations in her family she's taking a look at. So we're looking at those world events through this lens of her having her memoir of, like, you know, her memories of what happened there. But it's the way she saw her family during that time as well. I think it sounds terrific because she's such a good storyteller to start with, and to take the lens of looking at your family. Sort of like her version of group.
Yeah, I mean? Absolutely.
Looking at my family. It's my group. It's my group.
I read a sample on her website and it was about her dad, and I was completely sucked in. I really want to read this one. I think it will be really good. Plus, I'm going to adopt that mantra.
That's right. Yeah, it's just got to be better. Well, you know, I think that we're looking at a time right now where you want to hear what things that people have survived, and that things were really bad and then they got better again. And also, I think that this is a year that I've been looking at, what do you really need in life? What really makes you happy? And what don't you need to be doing? And I think we're spending a lot of time on that. And those who love books are reading more all the time, that say, that's the one thing that they have picked up and have been doing more this year, discovering books, trying different genres, different things. And though people got paralyzed a little bit when the pandemic started, they quickly rebounded and said, I just want to go out and read. So I'm seeing that your traffic has got to be up of people commenting, because that's what they're looking to do.
Yeah, we definitely we saw a big surge, and it's been continuing over time, and a lot of people just coming back to Goodreads as well, and a lot of discovery of books on Goodreads, which is lovely. That's what we want to do. And to your point, just trying to help people discover new voices. I think that's so important and really interesting. I've definitely been broadening my reading as well this year, which has been, it's fun. But also veering into every now and then I'll do the hard work kind of reading, but then there's that, you know what, we just all have to look after ourselves and take a little bit of escapism and self-care if that's what we need as well.
And I'm very interested to see, as a result, what your best books of the year are going to be. I'm really interested to see, and how this may be different from last year, or what people will be, like the voting that's going to start. When does it start? November, October? When did it start?
Goodreads Awards will launch on Tuesday, October 27th. The first round is usually 1 week. We're going to have 2 weeks this year, so people can really, if they're not seeing the books they love, they can write them in. But we're deep in the nomination process right now, which really takes a hard look at the data and what our readers are already loving. So we're really excited to present that back out to everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's
And
going to
yet,
be fun because people haven't been able to go to the store. They haven't been able to go to the store. They haven't been able to go to the library. So to be able to see what all their Goodreads friends are like, you know, what's resonating with them, all the members, I think that's going to be interesting to see this year because people weren't having those same experiences of being able to go out. We've been doing our Bookachino live events, be doing events like this, talking about author events, but that moment of just that kismet of walking through the library or the bookstore, it just hasn't been happening the same way.
so true, that whole serendipity effect, right? Of you go in to buy one book, but come out with 10 others because they were looking good, etc. But on the Goodreads Choice Awards, what Danny was saying, I'm really excited about this year because the Goodreads Choice Awards are the only major book awards chosen by the readers. And I think we all inherently trust other readers and want to see what's bubbling up. And we have about 20 different categories. But we do 15 nominees in the first round, but then we open it up and allow you to write in your votes for what you think is the best book if you're not seeing it in one of those nominees. And because we wanted to make it more people friendly, if you like, this year, we've expanded that voting period, that write-in period for 2 weeks, that first round. And then there are another 2 rounds coming for where you get to vote again. So it's a really fun experience as it all gets narrowed down.
And I like it because people can then go share. This is who I voted for. Did you go vote? I mean, there's so many great little pieces of this besides just what the best book is. And I think that people can expand their reading list at that point as well, because they're seeing what other people are, you know, looking at. It's interesting that no matter how much I read or how much I learn about books, there are always books that I've missed. Like there were books on our list today that I haven't heard about, I haven't seen, but obviously they're books that, you know, are getting a lot of buzz and talking about in many different circles. And I think that that's a nice thing right now is because we have a community where people could go out and look for books. It's always a good thing. It's always a good thing because we can't do, I mean, everyone's Zoom book clubbing. I mean, what's really surprised me is how people pivoted really pretty quickly to doing Zoom for all these kinds of events. And, you know, my mom is 91. She'll probably shoot me for saying that. But last week I got her camera because she realized she needs the camera and everything for book club because they picked up in September and they couldn't hear her. So I was like, okay, Mom, here you go.
She's brilliant to be online and doing it all because there's a lot of older people out there, especially in that they're approaching their 90s, that it's a challenge. It's a
complete challenge, but I have to say that what I really love is she sat down, she goes, now what does my background look like? And I love that moment. I absolutely love that moment because I was like, Mom, you're totally I'm your daughter because that's the first thing you're looking at is what's the background, you know? What are people seeing? Like, let's go there.
That's
we
brilliant.
went downstairs to have my father's birthday cake and my mother was still looking at her background. So I love that. Absolutely.
I started a book club, or I didn't start it. I was pulled into a book club with my friends from my Australia days, and we're scattered around the world. And I have to tell you, we've reached that tipping point that I think happens to book clubs in real world or not, because we're kind of on our 6th book. And everyone's just kind of flagging a little bit. And the person who did the organizing of it, it's kind of like, I'm waiting for her to, I organized the last meeting and I'm going to be sending them a message going, ladies, this one's going to fall apart. We gotta keep going. And Danny, funnily enough, the book that we're reading and need to have the discussion about is Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld, which I know you loved over the summer, right?
I loved that book, yes.
Yeah. And that's what you're going to, and it's going to be interesting to hear a different perspective from different people around the world. Like, what are you thinking about this book? What's your takeaway? I'm in 2 book clubs. The first book club was Young Moms. It was Young Moms book group. And we hadn't gotten together for months because they were homeschooling and home camping and doing everything. So we got together and did a fire outside the firehouse where we meet, which was kind of funny last week. And the group leader, the founder, told us, you know, we say people are moving so much. She is, well, I hate to say it, but I'm moving to Denver. And we were just there like, no, you can't go. You're going to have to phone in. We'll adjust the time, like all this kind of stuff. But it's like people are moving so much and they are making these changes in their lives. And the other book club is people in my neighborhood. And we're doing our first meeting since, I think it was February or March. And we're meeting tomorrow night. And we're going to somebody's house and meeting outdoors, which now precariously you have to worry about rain. Like, will your book club be rained out? Whoever thought about the book club having to worry about the weather? So, and I'm very interested to see how things happen as the winter goes on. Will we be out there in our ski clothes sitting around the fire, or what are we going to be doing? So, you know, living in the Northeast is not easy, folks. And a pandemic, it's very difficult.
Book lovers will find a way.
We will. We sit behind, we're more layers outside. I thank you both for joining us. We look forward to seeing the end of the year, the best books of the year. We look forward to having you back, I hope, the beginning of next year, because there's so many big books that are coming out then. I'm already getting excited. I'm already getting pitched books, and I'm like, wait a second, can I finish my fall reads first? But those do look really good that moment.
Yeah.
So thanks once again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, as always. It was always fun. Thank you, Carol.
And to our readers, we look forward to seeing you next time as well. Thanks, everyone.